Justin Wilson is best known as a Cajun comedian, but most people don't realize he also writes music.
When the evening breeze.
You may recognize this song Bayou Serenade as the theme for one of his Louisiana public television cooking shows, without the lyric. I met with Justin Wilson at a delightful French restaurant on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain in a little hidden bayou community called Mandeville, Louisiana. And after the wonderful meal, sat down in Justin Wilson's house. It was begun as a mansion back in the 1920s and 30s and then abandoned, and now has been put back together to splendid form out in the middle of nowhere. Justin, you and I had a wonderful supper tonight. That's something I talk about sometimes. I call it supper. Most people call it dinner. But did you call it supper or dinner?
I love to call it supper because I was brought up to it when it was called supper. Dinner was at noon.
Dinner's lunch.
Well, we used to have another lunch, too. We used to have something like, the English people may call it tea. We'd have a little snack maybe in the afternoon. We'd call that a lunch.
One of the things we were talking about at supper, and particularly with the chef at the restaurant, was how trendy food is. That in big cities particularly, there are all kinds of combination restaurants, and people are trying new things. There are people listening who know Cajun as an ethnic part of the U.S., which has an interesting accent and very different kind of music and very different cooking. Tell us a little bit about the Cajun ancestry, how that all started, and what the Cajun cooking lifestyle is like.
Well, first of all, I always tell people, I'm not ethnic, but y'all are, you know. Cajun cooking is creative cooking. That's actually what it is. They were forced out of Nova Scotia, out of Acadia, because they wouldn't swear allegiance to the King of England, and families were torn apart, and sweethearts were separated, and all that stuff. And they came to the United States. Some of them wanted to get to Louisiana, and they did come to Louisiana. There was a lot of them landed along the eastern coast. I noticed in the low country cooking, there's something Cajun influence in that, you know. But what it is creating what you have to offer, put it together using common sense and imagination in the proper amounts, and it comes out good food. That's Cajun cooking.
Is there a temptation to think of it as a food that's going to be very spicy? That was my misconception before we started talking. Are there a lot of people such as myself who really don't understand what the flavors are going to be?
A great man. Most people who have never experienced real good Cajun cooking feel that way, and you had never experienced it. Like I told you when we were driving home, we were talking about crawfish, and somebody asked me about what did alligator taste like. I told them like alligator, you know, but it's seasoned with proper seasoning, and you'd love it. You really would. But it's just putting the thing. We don't season food. I don't ever say spices. We don't spice food up. We season it, and we don't season with so much hot pepper that it's going to burn your lips, and man, you won't like it. We cook it to taste good. The bottom line is it does taste good.
I know I was amazed. I had a crawfish that had been stuffed in chicken, and I was reluctant, really, I guess, to order it. The word chicken attracted me, and the crawfish part didn't. But the crawfish wasn't fishy. I still can't figure out how to describe it, but it was nothing like I expected.
Well, that's the trouble with most people. Crawfish does not taste fishy. To me, it doesn't taste fishy. It tastes like crawfish, you know. But some fish is more fishy than other, and I figure the crustaceans don't taste as much like fish as a fish with just scales or skin. But crawfish, to me, is just wonderful. There's so many things you can do with it. Like, nobody but someone who'd been around Cajun would think about stuffing a doggone chicken with crawfish to make it taste good. It just improves the taste of the chicken, too.
Let's go back to your upbringing. Your father was agricultural commissioner here in the state of Louisiana. So you grew up in an environment where you knew about agriculture, certainly came from a home where people cooked a lot. But your first vocation was not a person presenting recipes on television or radio. Tell us how Justin Wilson evolved over the years.
My first vocation, you know, I even hate the word right today, you know.
Job. Love of what you're doing. Maybe that's better.
My first job, I guess, was to It's hard to tell which was my first because I took a job inspecting fruits and vegetables because I was reared on a farm, but I also had to sing professionally in order to make both ends. I didn't try to get them to meet. If I could get them close together, I was in good shape, you know. And my father was commissioner of agriculture. My mother was Louisiana French, a marvelous, spectacular cook. And she taught me to cook when I was young, very young. About 8 years old, I started trying to help her to cook to keep from working in the field. I'm no dummy. It was a lot easier in that kitchen than out there. And she would create dishes because my father was in politics. And people always dropped in it either at dinner time, 12 noon, or supper time. And she always could come up with something to eat. And she had her signals for her children. When she'd come out there and say FHB, that meant family hold back, don't ask for seconds. Or she'd holler MIK, children, that meant more in the kitchen, we could have more than one. And so I read with people who loved to cook. My mother loved to cook. My father liked to cook. He was a pretty good cook.
When we look at the chefs in the world, by and large, they're men. And I remember Julia Child one time telling me the fact that people looked askance at her when she wanted to put together a cooking show. She and her husband had lived in Europe. He was with the State Department. They came back to Boston. And her original plan was to have a guest with her on every show, and that didn't work after a while. Was there, when you were growing up, more of an acceptance that, hey, it doesn't matter whether you're a young boy growing up or a young girl growing up, if you want to cook, if you like to cook, do it?
Well, Cajun girls and Cajun boys both liked to cook. When I was brought up, I had sisters that were very good cooks. But I was a very good cook, too. And both of my brothers cooked, but not as much as I did, of course, because I loved doing it. It helped me in the jobs that I had. When I went into safety work, I'm a safety engineer by profession. And I used my cooking to get them to eat a little bit, and then I'd talk to them about safety, tell them Cajun stories to get them in their mind in a good shape for me to slip something into their head when they weren't looking. But cooking helped me in everything I've ever done.
You said safety inspector. For a while you lived in Chicago. Is there any hat you haven't worn?
Oh, a lot of them, and I'm not figuring on wearing some of them either. Yeah. I'm a safety engineer. I'm a professional member of the American Society of Safety Engineers and have been over 50 years. And I've used to have a little get-together with the foreman and have something to eat for them, cook something for them. That always help. And as I said earlier, just soften their brain up a little bit and when I'm telling stories and when they're not looking, slip something in there. And I've been successful as an independent consultant. I won't work for anybody. It's always an independent consultant.
So when we've seen you on TV, what you're doing there, combining storytelling with cooking, is not really an invention to say, hey, Justin Wilson would be good, let's make him a chef. This has been part of the way you've entertained and the way you've worked with people over the years before it was even a presentation on television.
Oh, yes, I never will forget when they asked me to come do a cooking show on television. I thought they were crazy. I really did. But I said, all right, I'll do it.
You were telling me before we went on the air that one of the turning points in your life as far as deciding what you were going to do was when you met Will Rogers.
That's right. I as an enforcement officer, that's what I was doing, which is another story entirely. I didn't make much money, so I would take those shows. People call them gigs now, but I'm still not in entertainment. And I would sing. I was a professional singer. And then I found that the people like to listen to my stories better than they did my singing, which is not very complimentary, but true.
Yeah, George Burns always had that problem, you know.
And so I started doing after-dinner talks. It's a very small fee, but it was a lot of money back there then. In 1935, if you got $50 for doing an after-dinner talk for an hour, that was good money. And when I met Will Rogers, and he was such a wonderful humorist, and I'm not a comedian. I have nothing written for me. I'm a humorist, and I think of myself as one. He told me to keep on doing what I was doing, and people didn't laugh enough. Well, people didn't have a lot to laugh about in 1935. We do have a little more to laugh about today, but we still don't laugh enough.
I asked Justin Wilson how he came up with all of his recipes, whether he had a staff or professional help putting together his cooking show.
Well, frankly, most of them I dream up myself. But, excuse me, I want to take a sip. This is water now, it's not wine, no.
Is that swamp water, or is it?
Swamp, yeah, came out of swamp. It's the imagination and common sense that I'm talking about. Like, I cooked something today. I had something that didn't taste good like it was, It was a smoked chicken, but they hadn't done when they smoked it. I picked it up. I thought that ought to be good. Well, it wasn't, so I made a roux. Put some onions, some bell peppers, some parsley, some garlic in there, and a little cup of wine. And I cooked that roux real good, and then I put the chicken in there, and it tasted good over pasta.
I guess there are very few things other than a souffle that if they don't turn out right, you really can't salvage by doing something to them.
Oh, you can eat a souffle, just kind of use it like a shoe sole, you know. It would be all right.
Justin, what has the distribution been like? Of course, I know about the programs I've seen on public TV. You've seen in other countries?
Oh, yeah. Canada, I get wonderful mail from there. And then I was on the Armed Services television and went all over the world. Had beautiful mail from people like that. And I'm glad because I think maybe I was helping our people. But I get beautiful mail, and it's heard in Costa Rica. Down there, places like that. It's on cable, my show is. But it amazes me that so many people like it. And I've never had anything to amaze me as much in my life as that does. Little children, there's no age deal on this, you know. Little children, I thought people were putting me on when these children run up to me and tell me, I watch your show. And I finally started asking, what did I cook? And they tell me. And older people, so it's just so wonderful, and it's been such a wonderful experience in my life to have made people happy. That's the whole idea behind it.
What are your feelings about the fact that we have become such a society of sandwich eaters? I mean, we had such a pleasant time, you and your wife and I sitting down tonight to eat. The fellow who owns the restaurant, the chef there, there's a wonderful kind of therapy that comes with that camaraderie of not being in a hurry, of sitting down over a good meal, enjoying it, and just talking.
Well, of course there's therapy, and it's therapy to me in cooking, taking a long time to cook something. But what is wonderful is to sit down to a meal of good food, and you can relate your experiences in a gentlemanly-like and a ladylike manner, you know, without getting dirty about a thing in this world, and enjoy the good food. To me, that's wonderful.
You have favorite dishes?
That's the favorite question of people. What's your favorite dish? And my answer, what I'm hungry for. Now, if I'm hungry for a jambalaya, I would make one. I was hungry for a sauce piquant today, so I made one with that smoked chicken. A sauce piquant is a spicy gravy, is what it is, you know. Serve it over rice or pasta. We serve it over pasta today. That's my favorite meal. What am I hungry for? Like I was hungry tonight for lamb, and I ate it, and it was good. Whoo, boy. When you make a jambalaya, each grain of rice is supposed to taste just like the meat tastes. So we don't use but one meat to make it. We make a sausage jambalaya. Every grain of rice tastes like the sausage. You make a chicken jambalaya. Every grain of rice tastes like chicken. Pork, and that's good, yeah. Every grain of rice tastes like that pork.
You have that trademark phrase, I guarantee. When did you start that? Was that something you got from your dad? Has it always been around? When did you first find that people think that's neat?
Well, I first heard my neighbor say a guarantee. She was Cajun, my next door neighbor, and Cajun say a guarantee. I didn't invent the word. All Cajuns say I guarantee. They guarantee their guarantees. That's how much they like the word guarantee.
So it's a very common word, but you've certainly made a trademark of that.
Well, I'm glad. I'm making a trademark out of something that people like anyhow. Well, I have people say to me, I guarantee, but it's a guarantee. But then I sort of take you over the on. See, that's it.
I've still not been to Mardi Gras. I'm going to have to. Every time I think about coming down, they say, well, we're booked up this year. You're going to have to book 4 years in advance.
Unhook and come to Mardi Gras. Everybody ought to go to Mardi Gras at least once. But what you do, come down the weekend before Mardi Gras, and you're going to see parades and everything that you would see on Mardi Gras Day. On Mardi Gras Day, that's when it may be 2 million people there. Lining the streets, just having in their masks and all that stuff. But you will see Mardi Gras come the weekend before, so that you can see some of the good parades without having too much of a hassle.
Justin, what about your cookbooks? I want to finish on that note. A person wants to know more about Cajun cooking. What kind of books on the subject have you produced? How widely available are they?
I think they're available all over the United States and mostly Canada. I'm not sure, but we're trying to get it put into other languages too. The latest cookbook was published by a major publisher out of New York, and You can go to any bookstore and ask for the Justin Wilson Homegrown Cookbook, and they'll get it for you.
You mentioned it was in the late 50s. You put out the first album, was on Ed Sullivan. You did more than one. How were they pretty big sellers at that time? And that was a time, though, that there were a lot of, maybe not a lot, but many storytellers. Sam Levinson doing family-type thing, Myron Cohen, a lot of urban Jewish humor.
Great people, too. But what happened, my stories came out, and they were very good sellers. In fact, they were best sellers. In fact, one of the funniest things that ever happened to me, I believe, in Houston, Texas, in 1961, my album that I made, Cajun Stations, outsold Elvis Presley. Now, that was really something. That's what they told me. I didn't believe them, still don't. But remember this, the conflicts, the Korean conflict, and was just over, and the Vietnamese disaster started, and people wanted to laugh. And I was doing my best to make them laugh. And I did the last album in the 70s. I did one in the 80s. I'm reminded I did one in the 80s, that's right.
Well, something that you have done is something I think a lot of us who are, we can all trace our ancestry back someplace. I mean, with a name like Dennis Michael Daly, I have to be Irish.
Not necessarily.
I'm Greek. I don't tell a lot of people, but I am Greek. Isn't there something in a lot of us that makes us want to preserve our heritage? Do you see, for example, the Cajun culture being diluted, and if so, quickly?
Oh, it's being diluted, but not quickly. In the heart of what is now called the Cajun land, but of course, actually, Cajun land goes all the way from inside Texas to inside Florida, because they settle all along that way. But they still, say like in San Martinville, they still have a mass wedding every year. And they still do they're cooking and they're getting together and having fun. To me, Cajun is actually a way of life, not just people. It's a way of life is what Cajun is. Living like a Cajun, you're having fun. That's it.
What about the religious heritage of Cajun people?
Well, it was primarily Catholic, and it still, I think, would be the number one. But there are all kind of religions in Cajun land now, Cajun country today, all kinds.
Justin Wilson, I want to thank you for supper, first of all, and then I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I wish I could stay here a week and a half as long as you'd keep feeding me.
Well, you stay here, I'll keep feeding you. Don't worry none about that. And we'd love to have you because you're a very entertaining man, too.
Well, thank you.
Because I think if you're trying to make people laugh, and that I believe in very, very much.
Justin Wilson, a very generous and funny man, and one of the best Cajun cooks in the country. His PBS series, by the way, is still seeable on YouTube. I'm Dennis Daly.